Hi, everyone. Welcome and thank you for coming. I'm Scott Muir. I'm Director of Undergraduate Initiatives at the National Humanities Alliance. We are very pleased to be partnering with CHCI to offer this webinar series. Today's is the second of three, and our focus today is on making the case to students, and we're thinking primarily of undergraduates, so that will be our main focus today. I'm going to share a few links in the chat quickly. The first takes you to the series, and you can register for the third event, making the case to upper administrators, and also see the video for the first one on policymakers. I've also shared a link to studythehumanities.org. That is an NHA site with lots of resources for making the case for studying the humanities to undergraduates. And also wanted to share a link to an event on this topic that we did back in 2021. So if you're hungry for more perspectives on how other centers are engaging undergraduates, you can check that out as well. So I'm now going to turn to our presenters. I'll let them introduce themselves and their centers and their institutions. Melinda, would you like to start us off?
Hi, my name is Melinda Price, and I am a professor in the College of Law and the director of the Humanities Center at the University of Kentucky.
I'll go next just to fill the void. My name is Carol O'Neill. I'm a professor of classics at Colby College. I was the founding director of the Center for the Arts and Humanities at Colby College, but I'm now the special assistant to the provost for humanities initiatives and serve as the executive director of the New England Humanities Consortium.
And I guess that leaves me. Thanks for having me. My name is Matt Jordan. My background's in philosophy. I used to be a philosophy professor at Auburn University at Montgomery, where I was also director of the honors program. But I'm now the Jack, Joseph, and Morton Mandel Dean and Chair for the Humanities at Cuyahoga Community College in Cleveland, Ohio. So I oversee the Mandel Humanities Center, which I think is a fairly unique entity in the community college world. And that's at, of course, Cuyahoga Community College, or Tri-C, which is a 4-campus, large community college serving about 16,000 students in Northeast Ohio.
Great. Thanks to all three of you for being here and for sharing your perspectives and for the great work you are doing to engage undergraduates on your campuses, which we'll hear about in a minute. I just wanted to acknowledge that the institutional diversity we have represented here is very much intentional. So we have three very different types of institutions and different kinds of centers situated within those institutions. And the hope there is that, all of you in the audience can that this will speak to your frame of reference, whichever type of institution you are located at, and how your center might be set up. As we know, there's a lot of variety there. Also, just want to note that in our engagement with humanities centers, we have found that this is an exciting time for this topic, that there's a lot of humanities centers that are really trying to take on the challenge of engaging undergraduates in the work of their centers more proactively. And so we're very excited to have three centers represented here today that have been leaders in that area and doing so in very different ways, as we'll hear about in a moment. So I will kick it back to, let's start with Matt this time, and they'll each have several minutes to share about how they're engaging undergraduates on their campuses.
Great. Well, thanks, Scott. And I'm happy to lead us off. So like I said, I oversee the Jack, Joseph, and Morton Mandel Humanities Center at Cuyahoga Community College. That center exists because of the largest gift that the college has ever received. We're enormously grateful and frankly, enormously lucky to have here in Cleveland, Ohio, a major philanthropist who's deeply invested in the humanities. And so this was prior to my arrival at the college, but both institutions, the Mandel Foundation and Tri-C, wanted to do something meaningful to invest in humanities education and also leadership developments for our students. And that led to the creation of the Mandel Center. It's the result of a $10 million gift, so a very substantial investment in the college and its students. And that gift was received in 2015, with the center really coming into existence in 2016. So in one sense, it's been around for a little while, but there were a few significant changes in leadership in the first couple of years that the center existed. And also, as some of you may have heard, there was recently a global pandemic of some kind, and that kind of interfered with our plans and getting things really off the ground. So in some respects, even though it's now 2023, it feels like we're really just getting started. It feels like this year is the first time that we've actually been able to hit the ground running with a clear vision for what we want a year to look like, and so on. So there's still a lot that we're learning, and a lot of things that I feel like are still in a very experimental mode. But the heart of everything that we do is an academic program called the Mandel Scholars Academy. That serves anywhere from 150 to 200 students at a time. Those are all full-time students, so taking a minimum of 12 credit hours. They have minimum GPAs of 3.0. It's intentionally not an honors program. We don't expect a 3.5 GPA as most honors programs do. And they can be coming from any major and any of our 4 campuses. So it's a very, very diverse group of students. All of those students receive a scholarship that is designed to be sufficient to cover the full cost of tuition, fees, and books for Cuyahoga County residents, which is really crucial. And unsurprisingly, it is the central thing that pulls students into our program. And then once they're a part of the Mandel Scholars Academy, they're required to take a 3-course sequence, all of which are humanities-oriented courses. They start off with a class called The Individual and Society. They then move into a class called The History of Cleveland. And then in their 3rd or 4th semester at Tri-C, they take a class called Community Engagement, where each section of the class is paired with a different community partner, and they work together in teams to solve some kind of problem or address a challenge that the partner has put before them. The professor for the class is charged with bringing in appropriate humanities content relevant to whatever the topic is or the partner's work might be. Those students are also required to complete a series of co-curricular activities, which can be extremely diverse. So if you're a Mandel Scholar at Tri-C, each semester you're expected to participate in at least 3 of those co-curricular activities. Might be a visit to an art museum, or a lecture, or a play, or a concert. But there are all of these different kinds of things that are keyed to our program values of humanities, leadership, and civic engagement. As far as really trying to engage students with the humanities, 2 of the things I just said are central, right? One is we have this curriculum that's very humanities driven, and that is designed to fit with any major a student might have at the college. And the other are these outside of class co-curricular activities. But beyond that, we've done a few things to try to make sure that students in the Mandel Scholars Academy are repeatedly being pushed to think about what the humanities are and why they matter. I think the single biggest challenge that we've encountered in our program is that we do pull so many students in who are there because they want the scholarship. And many of them don't know what the humanities are, and they frankly don't particularly care what the humanities are. And so throughout the program, and we're getting better and better at making this a consistent thing, at their orientation for the Mandel Scholars Academy, and then at the start of their 2nd semester, and repeatedly thereafter, we'll do these workshops that at the moment are just called Humanities Integration Workshops. If anybody can think of a cooler name, please let me know. But the idea is we require the students to attend these sessions where this is not rocket science. We simply talk about what the humanities are and why they matter. And we make a case over and over for the humanities as inviting us into a deeper, richer human life, being relevant to being effective citizens in a pluralistic democratic republic. And then finally, of course, how the kinds of skills the students are learning in their humanities classes or cultivating are relevant to any kind of profession that they might select. And the one thing that we're doing in that regard that maybe, I'm sure it's not novel, but it's not one that I've heard much talk of outside our college, is we've started to focus explicitly on what are called the intellectual virtues. And if folks in this meeting have a background in philosophy, you may have heard that language emerge in philosophical circles over the last, I don't know, a couple of decades now, where the idea is that the goal of an education is to shape students in a certain kind of way, to cultivate intellectual virtues like curiosity, open-mindedness, autonomy, and so on. And so we started doing more to give students that language to help them have a vision for what it is that we're trying to do. All of that's very central to us, and we're hoping over the next couple of years to branch out from our own students in the Mandel Scholars Academy and incorporate some of the same kind of content into our college's first year experience course. So that's kind of the next big thing on the horizon that I'm optimistic about. Also for students in our program, we have offered travel opportunities connected to the humanities. Those have been very successful. Interdisciplinary programming for students across the college, working on especially environmental issues and how those intersect with art and literature and things. We have at the college level, a partnership that's sponsored by the Mellon Foundation, the Cleveland Humanities Collaborative, where some of our students are able to take classes at Case Western Reserve University while paying Tri-C tuition, with the only stipulation being that they have to declare a major in a humanities discipline when they go to Case. And then finally, and I'll wrap up, I'm a little bit over my allotted time here. We just recently launched a new program called the Mandel Youth Humanities Academy, which is a summer program for high school students where we actually pay 30 high schoolers every summer the equivalent of what they'd make doing, a summer job at Arby's or something to come study the humanities for 9 weeks, which is really cool. I can talk more about it later, but I'll stop now.
Great. Thank you so much, Matt. And I forgot to mention, so we welcome your questions at any time. You can add those into the chat. We'll get to them when we've all had a chance to present. And but feel free to add those into the chat at any time. Melinda.
So we have at the Gaines Center for Humanities, so if Matt is on the new end of the spectrum, I guess we would be the old hands here. So we have had an undergraduate program for 40 years, almost 40 years. The Humanities Center was actually built around the idea for an undergraduate program where we take 12 high achieving students each year into a 2-year program where they spend their junior year mostly taking courses in a kind of modular fashion from humanities faculty. Actually, I should change that, not humanities faculty, but any faculty who have utilized a humanities lens in their research, who can teach in the junior seminar, and they spend their senior year doing a thesis, which can also count for their thesis in their department or in honors, and it can be in any subject as long as the students use a humanities lens. So that program really, because of the focus on those 12 students, made the Humanities Center a kind of, I would describe it as a relatively insular place for many, many years, right? Just the fellows. And so when my team and I, when we took over, the assistant director started 6 months before I did, we made it sort of our mission to democratize that program. So one of the things we did was to look at questions of diversity. There have been very little race or class diversity at an institution where we know we have high-performing students who meet both those categories. So we started expanding the sort of places where we reached out for students, and that has yielded, so we're choosing a new cohort right now that is 50% diverse students, 16% Pell Grant students, and I think an increase in international student applicants. But we also knew that we wanted to take the ideas in that kind of small seminar or cohorts of students and expand it out. So for every program that we do, we take students into account. So for all of our endowments to support community engaged humanities work, we always try to do some sort of curricular collaboration to increase the participation of students in those events. We have every other year a travel course, which will be when we get to challenges. That'll be one of our biggest challenges, where professors can apply to teach a course on a theme, and it comes with funds to support travel associated with that course. And we also have students compete to give an undergraduate lecture, which is open to the campus, and they win a financial award. So we are trying to figure out how do we expand what has been really good in this sort of 2-year fashion into maybe a semester-long or year-long program, so that more students can participate in our programming. So.
Wonderful. Thank you, Melinda. Carol.
Okay, well, people have been very helpful, Melinda and Matt, about establishing context. Let me just say a little bit about Colby. It's a liberal arts college in the Northeast with about 2,400 students. 50% of our students pay outrageously high fees, and 50% are on some kind of financial aid. There's students from all 50 states and many international students, about 10%, between 10 and 15% typically. In recent years, there's been a rapid change in the demographics of the student body. When I started at Colby, and for most of my career at Colby, it was about 10% students of color. The incoming class is 40%. Students of color. A very effective leadership in the last 10 years for that. There are many more students who are coming in first gen, and many more who need financial support, many more Pell Grant recipients as well. So Colby Center for the Arts and Humanities occupies kind of the middle ground between Matt and Melinda's centers, in that we came into being about 10 years ago, but the process for creating it started a little while beforehand. We were created with the benefit of a Mellon grant, but the center was designed over a 2-year period in a very inclusive collaborative process involving representatives from every department of the humanities and a couple of humanistic disciplines outside. And our express purpose from the beginning, mandated by the president and the trustees, was to focus on recruiting undergraduates into the humanities, which is quite different from a lot of the longer and better established humanities centers around the country. And our focus then over 2 years was to learn from others through attending events like this in person or online, to doing on-site visits or phone, it was pre-Zoom times really, or maybe just about starting Zoom, something like that. And we learned a lot from our peers. We didn't just automatically adopt things others were doing, but we adapted them to fit our particular needs and our particular context. But one of the things we were very concerned about was how the humanities had lost their sort of central position at Colby, and they'd been moved to the periphery of the campus attention. And so we wanted to come up with ways to sort of seize the, not the moral high ground, but the sort of visible intellectual high ground. And what we came up with, one thing was we looked at a lot of people who were trying humanities themes, and we adapted ours to be very much embedded in the curriculum. So we give out a large number of course development grants every year, and a significant number of them are focused on the humanities theme for that year. As a result, even though most people don't get the grants, it causes a wave of interest in the humanities theme. So we have anywhere between, say, 25 to as many as over 60 in one case, courses addressing an annual theme over the last decade. And the result of that is you have a huge percentage of the students at Colby are taking a course that is explicitly addressing the humanities theme. So it means they're addressing it from a variety of different perspectives, disciplinary, historical, whatever. And when we then have events on campus, we have an extremely informed audience coming to the events, and they're sort of primed to engage with each other and debate their understandings from the perspectives which they're getting in these different curricular experiences. And I think that has led to tremendous excitement. I'd say the biggest events that happen on campus every year, or the biggest one that every year, is the keynote for the annual humanities theme. Typically, it fills our largest space on campus, and often we need spillover rooms. And in recent times, it's been a question of having, well, more people online. Another thing we've done as well is to try to think about why students were less interested in taking humanities courses and were choosing courses in the sciences. One thing we observed was there seemed to be a real hunger for a kind of hands-on experiential learning. And we found that by creating humanities labs designed to involve undergraduates in the production of, as well as the consumption of knowledge or absorption of knowledge, and to get them outside the walls of the classroom in field work, visiting sites, doing something different from the standard sort of seminar or lecture. And I would say we've now been doing that for so long that it's really become kind of a feature of the humanities experience at Colby to have these humanities labs. Many of them, they're created with a grant one year, and then they become part of the regular portfolio of courses taught by the faculty member who received them. We also have engaged more and more with highly topical events. It's sort of like frontline humanities, if you will, something we're still thinking about how to develop this more. The first thing we took on was environmental humanities, which grew out of an annual theme, human/nature, which was our biggest, most successful one. We didn't want it to end. And so we got another grant to establish environmental humanities at Colby. And that has really taken off and fired the imagination of the administration, which actually has allowed us to have something, I think it's 8 to 10 tenure track positions in environmental humanities have been added in the last few years. And there are quite a few sort of, not yet tenure track, but hopefully will become tenure track at some point. The new director of the center, Dean Albritton, has also created course grants in areas of critical race, digital humanities, and medical humanities, which is something we've been leaning into with a faculty-focused public humanities inquiry lab. A lot of faculty at Colby are gathering to think about medical humanities and now starting to develop courses to roll out into the curriculum. Other things we'll do, I just mentioned quickly, we'll come back to perhaps in the questions. The center gives out lots of research grants to empower students to either work on a big idea of their own or to do a major research project leading towards a senior thesis perhaps, or to work on a team with a faculty member where they're supposed to be really both contributing. It's not really just assisting the faculty member. And then we do internships with local cultural organizations. And I think a key thing, we have a very empowered, active student advisory board, which helps the middle-aged faculty members have a better sense of what the youthful undergrad population at Colby would like to see. I'll leave it at that.
Great, thank you, Carol, and thanks to all three of you for your summary of this work and the great work that you're doing to engage undergrads on your campuses. So I'm going to start asking some questions here and get some discussion flowing. Again, welcome all of you in the audience to share your questions via the chat. We'd love to hear those and field those. So I'll start with one that's near and dear to my heart and you know, just central to the work that I do, which is thinking about something that Carol just flagged, the declining interest in the humanities and growing skepticism from students, parents, and others regarding the professional value of humanities education. So this has been, there's been a pretty clear decline nationally since 2008 that has not really yet abated, although there are local examples of the reversal of this decline, which we have worked to highlight in our own research. So I'd like to hear from each of you about what you see, what role you see for the Humanities Center to play in shifting these perceptions of the value of the humanities to help reverse declining majors and enrollments.
I'll start a little, probably because I'll have the least to say, in part because we view ourselves as working with the entire university. So even among those 12 students, you know, they come from 8 colleges across the university. So we're as likely to send students to medical school as we are to send them to graduate programs in humanities programs. One of my favorite theses was a student who choreographed a dance to explain her microbiology project. And I still don't understand anything about the microbiology, but the dance was beautiful, right? So we try to say we support the humanities broadly. And I think that that is part of it, right? So there are all kinds of people who are leading initiatives around environmental humanities, as Carol mentioned, or health and humanities. And we just try to see ourselves as a support to those kinds of initiatives by making sure that we reach broadly in terms of the support that we give to all students. So I don't know what the numbers are for humanities majors, in part because I teach in the law school, but I know for the work of the Humanities Center, we try to say to ourselves, every student at the University of Kentucky can benefit from more engagement with the humanities. How do we create situations where more of those students can do that?
Great, thank you.
You know, if I could piggyback on part of what Melinda was saying there, I think I'm far from the only person who's noticed this, but it doesn't seem to be in the center of the conversation. The distinction between a humanities education and a humanities major, right? I mean, I have the luxury having come to the 2-year world where I don't have to think too much about what my students are majoring in. I just need to get them excited about the humanities. And neither my role nor the center that I oversee hinges upon students explicitly declaring majors in a traditional humanities discipline. What I care about, what I'm focused on, is the question, do you get it, right? Do you see why poetry and literature and art and philosophy and religion and history, like why these things actually matter? And I think part of the answer to that becomes this professional question. I mean, I certainly don't want to minimize what Scott's saying there. It's huge, right? And I'm a dad myself, and I'm concerned about, you know, how much debt my kids will take on when they go to college and whether they'll get a job that can help them pay it off. I think it's a totally legitimate kind of concern. So we need to speak to those kinds of questions. And I think the resources that Scott alluded to earlier that NHA has made available are really helpful in that regard. But I guess the one other thing I want to throw out here is I think that those of us who work in the humanities might be well served to push back against that a little bit. I mean, we have to be prepared to answer those kinds of questions. And I think that we need to do things to help our students articulate answers to those questions. I mentioned the humanities integration workshops that we do at our college. I want our students, when they finish our program, to be able to say, here's what the humanities are, here's why they matter, and here's why they're relevant to my professional life. But I also think that we maybe in some respects are losing sight of what it is that led so many of us to fall in love with the humanities ourselves once upon a time, right? Like to recognize that, no, we're offering something that is different from a simple dollars and cents calculation, that we're not merely in the business of cultivating job skills. And I think that we can, two things can be true, right? We can say both of those things at once, and we can place an emphasis on the ways in which humanities skills are relevant in the workforce. But we need to do that in a way that doesn't lose sight of the fact that we're offering something that other people aren't. The humanities are their own thing. They explore what it means to be human. They invite us in a shallow and superficial age to live a deeper, richer, more authentically human kind of life. And so let's put that out in front of students as well.
Thanks, Matt. Carol?
Yeah, I think this is something that everyone obviously is thinking about, is why we were created. And I have to say that I think we had the creation of our center had an immediate effect in stopping the hemorrhaging of majors. But one thing I've realized, particularly as new challenges have come along, like the pandemic or whatever else, is we can never rest on our laurels. We cannot ever think we have created a process or a center or programs that work. We have to constantly be in a state of analysis and listening and adaptation and change as new things emerge, new interests, new foci. I also think that one thing, working, I worked very closely with the Humanities Division Chair now, and have for the last several years. Programs we tell students the value of the humanities don't seem to gain as much purchase as students where you tell them the value of a particular discipline within the humanities aimed at the students who are interested in that particular one. And I think every single department in the humanities ought to have crafted and have easy ways for students to be able to explain to their parents, guardians, whoever is funding their education, why what they're doing actually is the key or a way forward to success. I think that really makes a difference. Probably we've all had experiences where somebody is about to declare a major in the humanities, about to sign up for class, and then you hear all of a sudden, no, somebody has told me that I have to major in something practical like economics or government or something like that. And letting them know why it works. Like, for example, in classics case, we know that classic students have the highest success rate of getting into law school and the top law school programs. They also have an extremely high success rate of getting into medical school. That's something that's very useful for us to put forward. But every discipline has something that they can put forward, and we need to be very good at making sure we share those stories with our students and actually providing an easy format for them to be able to send that information to whoever's putting pressure on them not to take the humanities. I also think that we have to, sorry, go ahead, I'll stop.
I was gonna say, you read my mind, Carol, because as a person who teaches in a professional school, it's like, please don't send us another government major. Like the variety of and the skills that students acquire around deep reading, around writing are critical to almost every place that those students may go. And so I'm just gonna co-sign what you just said, so.
Yeah, sure. May I just say one other thing? Like one thing I felt there was a bit of a void in. I looked around. There were already some centers serving students, particularly in the social sciences at Colby, doing really wonderful work and creating fora where they could engage with each other outside the classroom, arguing, debating with each other. And I thought that energy was fantastic. And then you see the scientists working on really significant projects with professors or in teams. And felt like there wasn't quite the same degree of opportunity in the humanities. And if we want to attract the more students, we also have to attract the most ambitious students. So finding ways to empower those most ambitious students who want to be knowledge creators and not just knowledge absorbers is a really key part of any road to success, I think.
Great, thank you. And to your point about disciplinary specific arguments for the professional value of a humanities education. One of the resources you'll find on the Study of the Humanities site that I linked earlier is a report on scholarly society resources, where it points to those different disciplinary resources. There's been some really fantastic ones created by the APA, the AHA, et cetera. There was a question earlier. There's been some questions about the themes and interest in that, and appreciate Melinda and Carol sharing some more details about the themes that they've used in the past. There was also an additional question about the high school program that Matt mentioned. And so I'm going to give you a chance to answer that question, Matt, and then if any others want to chime in on ways that you're trying to engage students before they arrive on campus, would love to hear about other strategies as well.
Yeah, thanks. So I see Wendy's question there in the chat. This was something that we created in partnership with our principal funder. I mean, it is a great advantage to have a foundation that believes in the mission and wants to see it expanded. So it was in partnership with the Jack Joseph and Morton Mandel Foundation, and they've funded the full cost of the program, which I realize maybe in some respects is kind of a disheartening thing to say, in that, for us, it was as easy as having a partner who had considerable resources to put into it. But the way the program is structured, we have the students come in for 9 weeks from June through August, and we have a program director whose full-time job is to oversee this program, and he has organized it around 3 big themes or questions. I think last year it was, what is truth, what is beauty, and what is morality? And so the students spend a couple of weeks diving in each of those. They take various kinds of field trips to local sites that are relevant, and integrate some virtual reality and things. It's a really cool program. We aren't in a position to speak for the recruitment side throughout the academic year. that program manager visits local high schools, and they'll speak to English classes and social studies classes and so on, and talk about what's offered. It's impossible to say yet whether these students have gone on to study the humanities in college, because it's brand new. Last summer was the first summer that the program existed. I believe our initial grant is a 5-year grant, so we're a couple of years away from knowing where those students will wind up. So,
Thanks, Matt. Carol, did you want to jump in there?
I'm sorry, I kind of responding to things on the question in the chat. I've forgotten a little bit. Are we talking about themes now, or what are we talking
Well,
about?
we're talking about engaging students before they arrive on campus at the high school
yes.
level, or prospective students. And this is my cue to you to talk about your partnership with admissions.
Oh, yes. Well, initially didn't start as a partnership with admissions, but we started making short videos for the center, 3-minute or shorter videos promoting particular classes, which we then gave to like lab classes in particular. And we sort of would give them to individual departments to embed on their websites as kind of a demonstration of kind of the cool things that students were doing in Italian or German or classics or philosophy, and the kind of different way that we do the humanities at Colby. The then head of admissions sort of saw it and said, this stuff is like liquid gold. Can I have all of the films you've made? And we've made like 13 or 14 at that point. And whenever they received an inquiry or a student expressed an interest in a particular discipline, in the reply, they would embed one of our videos. And in fact, our video making was so successful that the president of the college said, we need to have a videographer who's going to make films like the center is making. And it became more part of the way Colby does things. So that was very helpful ways. And then we started meeting regularly. I was meeting as director of the center every month with the head of admissions to talk about trends, themes, where to go about doing, like, how come there's so few students applying in X discipline to the humanities? Like, and then is that a national thing? Is this something that's regional? Is it something that's just Colby? How do we boost that? That kind of very practical kind of conversation. And also I think it's worthwhile just be having that conversation constantly, because they're saying like, well, I need to make sure my people are paying attention to the humanities, because I'm going to have a difficult meeting otherwise this month, you know, and that's actually not a bad thing, having a kind of working positive relationship with admissions. Other thing we do is, like, when there's an admitted students day, we try to get as many people from the humanities to go down and talk to people. I think that we are doing a wonderful thing with the humanities at Colby. And so when we get students, we give them a chance to hear about that, talk directly with professors who will be working with, who they'll have research opportunities with, who they're taking humanities labs with, and so on. They're more likely to choose Colby.
Great. Thanks, Carol. There was a follow-up question there about the video making. Did you want to just quickly answer that question about, you know, who's making the videos? How do you
we've had actually almost all of our videos were made by a documentarian who is a part-time faculty member at Colby, and she was incredibly kind to us for the first few years, making and we were making these films on quite low budget. I'm afraid I don't remember the numbers now, but we were spending probably maybe $1,500 per video, something like that. But it was money well spent, and we weren't making a huge amount per year. So it was over several years they were building up, trying to do 4 or 5 per year. And by the way, over the years, I will say, I said we start off with 3 minutes. We've been told now that we need to get them down to 1 minute for them to be effective. Attention span is decreasing. I will say, though, if you're preaching to a targeted audience, it doesn't have to be quite that short. If a student is interested, for example, use Italian, and they get a video about somebody in the Italian department, they'll stick through the 3 minutes, because we can actually track how long they watch. And the average time is nearly the full 3 minutes. So.
Great. Thank you for that. So I wanted to, you know, there was questions about the, you know, some of the logistics behind the thematic programming, and I wanted to kind of riff off that question and broaden it a little bit, and just think about how many humanities centers sponsor guest lectures and other scholarly events, which may be part of a big thematic sequence or maybe one-off. And I'd like to, ask each of you to reflect on, what strategies have you tried to engage more undergraduates in this type of programming, which seem effective? How do you make this a really rich experience for the undergrads?
So we've tried several methods to do this. So we have a big writer. We have partnered, for instance, with the Honors College. When T.R.E. Jones came to be the big lecturer for our theme on, I can't remember what the theme was. I think that was just as I was hired, but we partnered with the Honors College, and we were able to do a common reading experience, which allowed us to fill up one of our largest auditorium, in part because those students had read the book, so they were her latest book, so they were keenly interested. But common reading programs have become, quite expensive because of the cost of books. And so one of the things we've done now is to work with, we have a program that's paid for by somebody else, where every student gets an iPad in their first semester. And so now we can negotiate with publishers to get an ebook, and then the people who run that program can push that book out onto the iPads for all students, which cuts the cost of a book significantly. But anybody who comes to campus has to meet with students. And that includes the students in our undergraduate program, but we also target different students depending on the interest. So our speaker this year was Bill T. Jones, around our theme, which was movements, which focused on social movements and dance. We invited our students from dance, students from African American studies, students from the LGBTQ Center, to meet with him in a small group. There were about 30 of them. So we try to keep the numbers relatively small so that it's a meaningful interaction. But if you come to campus, you have to meet with students, is our view. Even though the endowment may be for community engaged work, our belief is we are first and foremost responsive to the community of students at the University of Kentucky. And so we work that into the contract. How many, people negotiate that different ways. How many, sometimes they limit the number of students they will meet with. Sometimes they ask, could you include students of this particular kind? And we try to accommodate that. So we work through collaborations in this way in order to figure out how to get students to have a buy-in to what we're doing that makes them want to participate rather than being forced to participate by having faculty require that they come as part of a course. Now, there is some of that, and it has some value, but they don't look as happy in the audience as they do them when they have some buy-in. So.
One thing that comes to my mind, Scott, at the end of your question, you said something like, how do you make these public events and things richer experiences for the students? A change we implemented a couple of years ago, I noted in my initial comments that our students attend 3 co-curricular activities every semester, which often are lectures or public events like that. We typically have students do this in smaller groups. We try to cap those at 9 unless it's a special event, because we want them to interact with each other. And then we'll send a member of our staff or a member of our faculty along to the event with them. And it used to be the case that students would have to write a 1-page reflection essay on the event. And I suspect that people who are in this meeting probably have read enough 1-page reflection essays to predict the kind of work we were getting back. I mean, it was very perfunctory, pretty much a waste of everybody's time, the students and those of us who were reading them. So we just scrapped that. And we said, look, for those of you who are chaperoning one of these events, take a couple of minutes afterwards to grab a cup of coffee with the students or do something where you just have a conversation about that event that you just attended. And that's been extremely successful for us. It's really gotten students to engage, at least in the moment, with humanities content that otherwise might have just been, oh yeah, that was cool, went to the art museum, that's the end of it. But instead thinking about, over a cup of coffee, well, what is art, right? And why is this significant? That's been great for us.
Great, thanks, Matt. Carol, would you like to
Sure.
take that up?
Yeah. I mean, so much we could say here. I really do believe in the importance of partnering with others. We've had great partnerships in the past with the Museum of Art, the Center for Public Affairs, student groups. To speak to Melinda's remarks, I mean, we also, as part of contracts, write in various kinds of interaction with student groups. And by partnering with others, we can sometimes afford to have a mini residency where the people are there for 2 to 3 days, which allows them to visit maybe a couple of classes, meet with an affiliated student group might be interested, to maybe have a dinner with a group of students or a lunch, as well as doing the great big public event with hundreds. And it's so much better than just a transactional event. I think as well, I mentioned already the embedding of these, of like the really biggest speaker and a series of other speakers in the humanities theme. And for many of these classes, you know, part of the grant process is like, how will you engage with different parts of the programming for that year? So professors will say you have to go maybe to a certain number and report back to the class. In a language class, might come back in French and tell us about what you saw last night or something like that, or philosophical interpretation of something that was said. I want to go back also to Melinda's focus on students and talk about the importance of student choice and helping them help us, or allowing them to help us in choosing speakers they want to hear from. One of our first steps is asked our student advisory board, this is the theme, who would you like? Here are some names that faculty put forward. What do you think of those? And I have to say the response of the students to a lot of the names suggested by faculty is, I don't know who they are. And that's actually really important, you know, so getting somebody they know, whose work they know. Roxanne Gay, for example, was somebody that students suggested. Baratunde Thurston, another one the students suggested. Bill McKibben, Salman Rushdie, names that they recognize, they're familiar with the work before they've even started engaging with the theme. That's really fantastic. I saw, and maybe want to tie this back to a question I saw in the chat about is the term public humanities useful? And I know there are various people from various public humanities networks on the webinar today. I think it is, but it has to be put in context. Not all of them immediately know what that means, but they can learn very rapidly at the first event they go to. There's a public humanities event, and then leave more informed, more empowered. And I think there's a real hunger for our students to learn how to harness the power of the humanities and put it to the public good or engage with it in a public way. So yes, my answer is yes. I'm sure others jump in on that.
Can I add one more thing? There's
Sure.
also something to be said for a bit of branding, even if the students don't know who you are. So one of the things that we struggle with when I became in charge of the Humanities Center is that we had all these programs, but the people who went to one didn't realize that all of it was part of programming by the Humanities Center. And so what we have worked hard to do is to say we have the Breathitt Undergraduate Research Lecture at the Gaines Center for the Humanities. And when we give mini grants or grants to anyone for anything, we ask that they use our logo, and that if they thank anyone publicly, they thank us as well. Because we were supporting events for which no one understood. And part of doing that, which I can only imagine at Colby, with the great things you're doing in Cleveland, once people know your name, even if they don't know the speaker, they might be willing to give it a chance, in part because they have experienced the other great work that you do. We also have used Eventbrite. I don't know if you all use that as well, to recruit people or to advertise to the community. And that gives us a lot of background information to expand listservs beyond just people who would normally volunteer to be added. So we have a wide array of lists of people, but at every time when people say to us, they now say, you know, you did that great thing, because we also have events not on our campus, but at the campus of other universities in town. And they said, you know, the Gaines Center did that great thing at this university, but they know it was the Gaines Center, at the Gaines Center for the Humanities. So I think there's something to be said for making sure that people know what you do, so that even when you want to experiment in your community and say, this is a person who is not as well known here, but would be great, they know that you do great things. And so to stay on top of that and keeping a kind of good and known name in the networks in which you're trying to draw an audience, I think is important.
You know, one thing that's at least tangentially connected, and this is another at least attempt to use newer technologies to try to make an impact. We launched a podcast last year, and our numbers haven't been huge, but we were pleased. A student came in to interview recently, and she had listened to a couple of episodes. Our students have given good feedback. I'll mention, if anybody's interested in our Youth Humanities Academy that I described earlier, we did an episode a couple of months ago, back in October, detailing that and talking to some of the students who were involved. But one of the things that's been great about that for us is it's been an excuse to get people from other places that we want to connect with, because, you know, all of us love hearing ourselves talk, right? So you invite somebody to, hey, you want to come be on our podcast, right? And they'll sit down and talk for half an hour or an hour or whatever. And then it's a way of kind of getting into some of these other places. And it also gives you a resource that can then be dropped into other stuff. So, like, for example, we have an annual trip to Alabama to, we call it the Roots of Social Justice, the Alabama Civil Rights Tour. And one of the things we're going to be doing this year that we hadn't done before is when the students are on that long bus ride from Cleveland to Montgomery, we're going to ask them to listen to a couple of episodes of this podcast, because now we've got it, right? And we've got some stuff that focuses on relevant issues. So I don't know if other folks have tried that or had success, but it's something we're doing. I'll put a link in the chat.
Great. And
Go
ahead, Melinda.
We had no digital footprint before the pandemic. And I really want to thank CHCI for the programming they put on for directors and associate directors to encourage them to remain relevant. And so now we have actually quite an expansive digital footprint. And so I was going to say, if you don't use social media or YouTube or any of these things, you just have to suck it up and do it. It is not, I don't enjoy it. I still struggle with it. But you have to begin reaching out to the students in the places where they are. And Sharice Alexander Adams asked a question about working with your enrollment management people. We started producing our own, which we thought were great for videos produced by a law professor and staff members, wonderful videos, but now we have a sample to show to people of the power of what could be done. So perhaps if you think about what are the materials you might like, and how you might do a sort of small version of that, that might get people on board. So.
Thanks, Melinda. I wanted to just circle back real quick to this question about the public humanities and put in a plug for my colleagues at NHA's work, especially Project Director Michelle McCurry, who, you know, the Humanities for All initiative, I think, is really helping to make this term less opaque and to make it really clear what is going on under the banner of the public humanities and what that's all about. There's some really great resources to that effect, as well as, you know, literally, you know, hundreds and hundreds of examples of projects that fit the bill. But I wanted to open that up to anybody else. Carol already kind of chimed in there, but I didn't know if Matt or Melinda wanted to take up this question of, you know, how to sort of the public humanities as a concept, as a brand, how that's working and intersecting with your work, if at all.
I can't say that we've done much of anything explicitly in that regard, but I feel bad about it now, if that's counts for anything.
Well, I don't think you need
I'm
to.
certainly going to start using this Humanities for All phrase. Hashtag Humanities for All might be popping up soon from the Gaines Center for the Humanities. So we hadn't really thought about it, in part because we had a public mission already. Right. And so we had already been doing extensive community engaged programming. We're also at a land grant institution, so we're compelled in a certain way to think about the Commonwealth of Kentucky and all the work that we do. We work with our State Humanities Council, which happens to be 2 doors down from our office because their office is on campus. So I hadn't really thought about it in any intentional way, but I certainly am going to think about what it means. But I do know that there is a craving in our community that for people to have access to the wonderful things that we sometimes take for granted at our institutions. And so opening it up to the public. So when we knew, for instance, that a lot of the more seasoned saints, as some people would say, the older people who came to our events would not want to come to campus even after they were vaccinated. We moved to a hybrid fashion, which has failed many times, almost as many times as it succeeded, but we try, and they know we try, and they keep coming back. So we are trying to think about how do we continue to pull in, learn from the lessons of the pandemic to bring in more of the public to the work that we do. We have been talking to the agricultural extension, which is in every county in Kentucky, to think about how, for instance, if we bring an author to campus, can we push some of that work of their books into the agricultural extension offices, and then those people could participate in a hybrid fashion. I mean, we're trying to think about all the ways that we can connect, to our first priority, which are the people, the citizens of the Commonwealth of Kentucky, but people who are interested in humanities programming.
Great, thanks. And just to, circle back, I also think that a lot of the civic engagement themes that you promote through the Mandel Center, Matt, also dovetail with this concept of the public humanities. So, I agree that it's not one that's always immediately apparent to students. And with Carol's point that it has to be operationalized and made really clear, like what's going on with that. But I think you've all shared examples of engaging the public, engaging public questions of the public good in your programming, and also in using media, especially, to make your content more accessible to the public. So I think these are all really great examples that dovetail with that mission of public engagement. We are running out of time here. I think I'll ask one last question, which is just if any parting words on valuable partnerships with either within your institution or without that have helped your center to engage undergraduates. Anybody want to lift up any of those that haven't come to the fore yet?
Well, let me just jump in and say that actually partnering with NHA and CHCI is extremely valuable when we're looking beyond the campus. I think we got engaged and we're encouraged to get engaged with CHCI when we were just developing our center, and the offices of the center, Guillaume and Aaron and others, are incredibly helpful and great resources for knowledge, as is the NHA. You can see the kind of materials you're putting in the chat, just, drawing people's attention to that. We don't know the good things that are out there already, and we're reinventing the wheel. And that's been very useful off campus. Partnerships on campus, there are very few that aren't useful or valuable. I mean, we try to do events shaking things up. There's some who are very easy to do, like things like an art museum or other centers. But we've tried to do programs where we partner with the football team or, with whoever, trying to get different people to engage with us. And I think that's always valuable. And thinking, like, as soon as a faculty member says, I want to bring X speaker, say, well, we would like you to have another partner, not just us, your department, us, and is there a student group you can think of, or somebody else on campus? So it's not always us deciding, other people coming to us with ideas. And yeah, I'll stop there.
We opened our grants for humanities program to staff as well. And we actually got, we've given, I think, one each year. And if a group of staff members propose a humanities speaker they would like to bring to campus, we almost always give it to them. In part because we can't be everywhere, but if we can get in with the staff in many places who are there year after year, then they will reach the students for us. And so one of the things I would challenge people to do is to think about, what is your working relationship with staff at all levels, residence halls, the department managers who all the students come through, the people who work in advising, people in the provost office. So you need to think about how you're connecting with staff, and are you appreciating their understanding and support of the humanities continually throughout their time in the university.
Mm-hmm.
And I would point on our end to institutional partnerships, especially places where you have an opportunity to make a class experience something totally out of the box, something different, right? So you can come to Cuyahoga Community College and you can take a class that meets at the Cleveland Museum of Art. We have a world-class art museum here in Cleveland. If you're ever visiting, check it out. It's a beautiful place. And you can be a community college student taking your honors art history at the museum, or we have courses that meet at the Rock Hall. Things like that get students outside of just, oh, I'm sitting at a desk, I'm listening to somebody talk at me, right? But a completely different experience that's driven by one of our humanities partners have been really valuable.
Wonderful. Strong closing note there from all three of you. Big thanks to Melinda, Matt, and Carol for the great work that you're doing to engage undergraduates on your campuses and for sharing that today. And a big thanks to CHCI for partnering with us on this webinar. Thanks to all of you for joining us.
Yeah. Thanks so much for inviting us. And I'm sure I speak for the others when I say, if you have more questions, please email us and we'd be happy to give you any suggestions or information we may have.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Thanks everybody so much.
Thank you, everyone.